Okay.
Okay.
Hello, welcome back to our channel and to another sitting and talking session.
Yes.
Or we're gonna abbreviate it and call it SAT
Set.
because we're already sitting, right? Yes.
Yeah.
That's the pretense of, wait, is that the correct term? Pretense?
I
Anyways,
don't know.
so today, want to introduce our topic?
Well, today we decided it would be fun to talk about things we wish we learned in sex ed. And what kind of brought this topic up was we recently watched a special on Netflix on pleasure. Wasn't it just called Pleasure or
It's
something?
called Principles of
Yeah,
Pleasure.
Principles of Pleasure, where they, talked a lot about what sex is. It's more than just sex, about, you know, not feeling guilty,
Mm,
just feeling pleasure, in general. And I thought it was a really good topic to talk about. I really related to it a lot. So it kind of made me feel like, oh, at least I'm not the only one because they focused more on female pleasure. Or
mhm.
actually, that's pretty much the only thing they focused on, which is female
Yeah.
pleasure, talking about all the different aspects of like relating to female pleasure. And what I liked about it is that they had a lot of diversity in it as
Mhm.
well. It wasn't just like certain race, it had several different like ethnicities, and it was just women. So that's what I really,
And different like
yeah,
gender
or
and
I guess
non-binary
people who
people.
identified as women.
Yeah,
I
so
guess,
it
yeah.
was like a diverse group of people talking
Hmm.
about this, mainly in like their point of view and like what they experienced. So definitely watch that.
Yeah.
Don't want to go too much detail in that just because it's gonna take away from what we're gonna talk about.
Yeah. But also, I think another thing that we had talked about too was another show, which is Sex Ed.
Mm,
So if you haven't seen that one, that was also really good.
yeah,
Yeah.
that show is definitely. I feel like something they should have done when we were in high school,
Mhm.
and I mean even when they were teaching. I'm sure they're still teaching sex education, but
Yeah.
not to the level that they should be.
Mm.
Honestly, it feels like the way they talk about it, it just feels like it's such a taboo
Yeah.
conversation or topic to talk about.
Yeah. So there's just some things that we wish we would have known back then, that you kind of learn through like experience as you get
Mm,
older when it comes to sex. But it would have been nice to have like a warning, like of what could happen and all the different things relating to sex besides just abstinence and using a condom,
mhm. Yeah, I feel like they should have um encouraged, I guess, in a sense, like lack for a better word, but like it just seems like what they were trying to teach more of back when we were in high school was that you shouldn't be having sex, but like if you are, you should do it this way and that way
Mhm.
instead of like telling you that it's okay to do things like differently and like sex is it's kind of like of a messy
Yeah.
activity.
Yeah.
Like it's never perfect like how it is in the
Mhm.
movies and shows that you watch, especially. Oh, we can get into it right now. But like, I feel like they should have been more open about it
Yeah.
instead of like kind of like a closed-minded way of teaching. I
Mhm.
mean, where it makes you feel afraid to even like do it.
Yeah. Like, or yeah, like, or even bring up like just having a conversation
Hmm.
besides just being told like, oh, you shouldn't do this and you
Oh, that's
shouldn't do
that's
that.
one of the things I wrote down.
No,
Me
yeah, because I don't really remember honestly much about my sex ed class.
neither.
I know I had like two different classes, and I think it was like in sixth and maybe like seventh grade. In one class, it was taught by like our gym teacher who was an older man, like in his, I don't know, 50s maybe. And I just remember him talking about like how to use a condom, things like that. And then
Did he use a banana?
I honestly don't remember. I feel like he might have. He probably did. So he talked about that. That's the only thing I remember from that class. And then I think in either seventh or eighth grade, that's when we talked about more of like childbirth and things like that.
Mm,
But I honestly don't really remember much. We did go over like the anatomy and things like that, but there was never really any talk about like how uncomfortable it can be, like how important
Mm,
communication is, how like it's not how it is in the movies. It's not like fireworks and things like that. So
it can be.
it can be, but like the first time, like it's not like how you would see it like in the
Mm,
movies, you know.
yeah.
So
So we wrote down some things to talk about. I actually wrote down quite a bit, and we kind of touched on some of it already. Um, so the one thing for sure I feel like they should have said, I maybe they've said this in school,
mhm.
but I don't remember it. But like how porn isn't realistic. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
shocker, right? Did I just blow
Yeah.
everybody's mind? No. I mean, we all know. Well, maybe not a lot of people would know this, but porn really isn't like the metric to compare yourself
Yeah.
to because these are paid actors and actresses and whatever. They're paid to entertain and, yeah, you can get some tips and like ideas on like what to do here and there, but that's as far as you can get with porn. Like if you try to compare yourself to how some of these
Mhm.
people are,
Like how they look or like what they're doing, you know,
yeah,
like that.
especially like, if you're a girl, of course you're gonna compare yourself to how the actresses are in these type of industry. Like they're paid to do that and they're paid
Mhm.
to look like that,
Mhm.
essentially. And a lot of times I think people misconstrued that with reality. Same thing with men. Like I think men think that like all these guys are like lasting hours and whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, well, we don't know what's really happening there behind the scenes.
Mhm.
So, I mean, yeah, it's like good for entertaining and like, masturbating and stuff like that, but still like I shouldn't compare myself to this
Mhm.
because when sex ed doesn't like quite teach you that, and then
Yeah.
you resort to
That's what
porn,
I'm
and then
saying.
you like start having unexpected or unrealistic expectations when you first have like when you first have sex, and then it doesn't happen exactly how it is in porn, and then
Mhm.
you're just like, well, something's wrong. It's like either
Yeah.
me or is it her or is like all this
Yeah.
other stuff.
Which is kind of sad because, you know, it's like, because you don't talk about that in sex ed. I feel like a lot of people go to porn to learn more about
Yeah.
what sex is supposed to be. But like you said, it's just a lot of, it's just acting.
Hmm.
And I feel like also like in sex ed, they don't really even talk about porn. Just kind of like, oh, you shouldn't watch that.
It's
But
taboo.
yeah, it's taboo to talk about it. But I think it's really important to bring it up and be like, you know, you might have seen this on the internet. You know, there's like like porn is, what
Hmm.
exactly it is, and you know, informing the students that you know a lot of the times you might, if like you don't know how to bring it up or don't have anybody you feel comfortable talking to, you might want to look at these sites, but just know that it's not realistic. You
Hmm.
know, you shouldn't be comparing yourself to that, and they can provide like a lot of misinformation too, like
Yeah.
regarding to like how long sex is supposed to last. Like,
Mm.
you know, what you could be doing, like even though it might look like they're experiencing like some pleasure, that it feels good, that it's important to
Mm.
communicate to your partner, you know, that like if they try and do something like that that you don't feel comfortable with
Hmm.
doing, to let them know like, you know, actually that doesn't feel good.
Hmm.
Because a lot of times if you don't say anything, then your partner is going to think that it does feel good and they'll continue to do it, and then that can, you know, lead to other things in their
Yeah.
relationship. So.
That was definitely one of the things I remember learning. I don't remember if I've learned this from watching porn actually, was that everybody is different. I mean, that term is like it can carry across anything. So I remember hearing someone say that, just because one person feels pleasure when you're doing this is
Mhm.
probably not going to apply to another person when you're doing it with them. And so you kind of have to learn this. And I feel like as men, we always have that one move that we go to when we're doing it. And like, it's just like, this worked the last time I did it with
Mhm.
somebody else, but maybe it'll work with this person. And like a lot of times, if you don't communicate
Yeah.
what their likes and dislikes are, you're probably gonna end up like causing more problems because they think that you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And so yeah, and then that's when you bash heads and like you're like it's not as fun anymore. It
Mhm.
just feels like you're working at that
Yeah.
point.
And I think that's why it's important to bring these things up, like in sex ed, like communication. I don't really ever remember hearing that, like, growing up or anything like that.
Hmm.
That it's like you have to communicate like things that you like, that you don't like to your partner. And I feel like because I was just never really like brought up, that something like didn't really happen.
Hmm.
And I feel like that happens with like a lot of couples, is that you're either like afraid to like communicate and saying like, oh, I don't like that, because you're afraid that um they might get their feelings hurt,
Hmm.
and they not might not want to have sex anymore, things like that.
Yeah.
But I think that's really important to bring up, especially if you have like maybe kids, or you have like a sibling that might be young, and that they're still trying to work things out. It's just to really encourage them to just communicate with their partner. I think that's one of like the most important things.
Yeah. And I think like part of that is also like as a society, it feels like women aren't allowed to
Mm-hmm.
speak their minds in this sense. Like, and I think this is the problem here. Like we've been trained to think that like, you know, if they don't say anything and they give you a certain reaction, then that might be good. And
Mm-hmm.
we don't get told to ask if they're okay with it, like of course, if people are gonna have sex, they're gonna be like, "Oh, you like that?" It's like, but then like, it's not really asking the right questions. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, if they're reacting a certain way, you may think they're having pleasure, but they, in their mind, it's like, well, I don't want to say that this isn't the right thing because one, it's gonna ruin the mood and
Yeah.
also probably hurt their feelings. Um, but if they're mature and like secure within their own self, I think just having like open dialogue will definitely help more than hurt the situation. Because
Yeah.
in our like experience, like, whenever we've done it, and she's actually told me, like, I actually had to pry this out of her, like not during the sex, like after it. It was just like, so did you like what I did, or did you enjoy that I did this or that? And then she'll actually like take a second to like think about it and then explain to me what I did wrong. Not like what I did wrong, like what she didn't like. So then,
Yeah.
like, that's like, okay, well, now I know what not to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because basically what I've been trained to like do essentially from what I've experienced in the past. And I remember like, okay, this was like really bad advice, but like I remember watching uh some porn and like how they give um I don't know what a nicer way of saying this, like basically fingering the girl. And like the way they make it seem important, it just looks like
Mm.
it's not fun for the
Yeah.
girl,
Yeah.
but then as a guy, you don't know that.
Yeah.
And so
Like they're just acting,
exactly.
obviously.
And
Yeah.
so when you go and do that, it doesn't give the same reaction.
Mm.
You're thinking, am I doing something wrong, or is there
Yeah.
something wrong with her? But realistically, you shouldn't be doing it like that. And so it's where communication is important. And that
Mm.
was one of the things I wrote down too, is that you need to ask your partner like if they like what you're doing,
Mm.
or if that you need to do something differently, or you need to do it slower, or you need to do it a little faster, or I don't know, something like
Yeah.
that. But things like that. And I feel like when we were in school, it was never an open discussion.
Yeah.
Like you never
Totally.
get that opportunity to ask the question. Well, I guess you did
Yeah.
get the chance to, but like, how are these kids gonna know what questions to
Yeah.
ask if you don't really explain to them how sex really works? Like
Yeah.
you I feel like the way that the system works is they teach you that sex is only used for procreating, I
Mm-hmm.
guess, in a sense.
Yeah.
So the way they teach it is just like, well, you don't do this for pleasure. It's like you're doing this to make a baby.
Yeah.
And so you kind of don't get that opportunity to come up with these questions, especially if you're brand new to having sex, because your
Mm-hmm.
first time is never great. It's
Yeah.
always just like, well, that happened.
Yeah.
A couple seconds later, it's
And
done.
I think it is hard too. Like, I mean, shouldn't say completely blame the teachers, but I think it is hard to teach a class when, like, a lot of the kids, some might have, had sexual experiences, but like a lot of the kids that age don't. So it's kind of hard to ask the right questions, especially when you're not at the level of maturity.
Hmm.
So I feel like it's really important for like the education system to kind of like bring these topics
Hmm.
forward, because a lot of times like we won't know what to ask until we have actually experienced it once we're
Hmm.
like a little bit older. Because I feel like in high school, I don't really remember having like a sex ed class.
I think
Like we
we
had
did.
health classes and stuff like
Oh
that, but I
yeah.
feel like they kind of didn't talk to it as much as like we did when I was like in seventh or like eighth grade.
I didn't even get to
Which
take those classes. I'm gonna be real with you. My parents didn't let me go through the sex education in sixth grade or seventh grade. I think it was until high school. Like being, I feel like a lot of Asian people, maybe even minority people can relate to this, but
yeah,
being Asian and like, you don't really talk about this kind of thing. And like the sex talk I got from my parents was just like, it was like a lecture. And it was like not even like you shouldn't be, or no, it was just like you shouldn't have sex until after college, and then like even then you should just do it with your wife or whatever. And I was just
yeah.
like,
It's pretty much. I feel like I never really even had like this sex talk with my parents, and I asked my mom recently. I was like, "Why don't you ever have this sex talk with me?" And she said, what she told me was like, "Well, they taught you sex ed in school." So I was just like, but it wasn't like a good like lesson, you know. It'd have been nice to like feel a little bit more comfortable talking about that with my parents, because I feel like as a Mexican woman, like that just wasn't even like a topic to discuss. It was just like, nope, no boyfriends because boys have bad intentions and you're gonna get pregnant, so you have to wait until you're married to have
yeah,
sex.
that was pretty much my
And
conversation too.
yeah, and I was like, that's not like helpful at all, because it's like you get to a certain age where you're like in your 20s. Like once you get to like what, maybe like 25 or something, and you still don't have a boyfriend, it's like, why don't you have a boyfriend? It's like, you like never let me have one, and then like you get to your 30s and you're not married. Why aren't you married yet? Like
You
really,
never
like
allowed me
yeah,
to
you
have this
never allowed me to
experience.
have like a boyfriend. Like you never made me feel comfortable like coming to like telling you like, oh, I have a guy that I like, things like that, you know. It would have been nice, but I feel like I can't really blame them either, because I'm sure they never got that sex talk either. I'm sure it was like whatever they told me is what like their parents told them, what my grandparents told them.
Yeah.
So I think it is really hard, and I think as you know we get older, hopefully we can have that sex talk like with our kids, like once we have them. And I feel um like I would like other millennials or Gen Zers, I guess I would call them, might have an easier time bringing some of these things up. Maybe just at least like from what I've seen when I've gone to like middle schools and things like that when I was working at a different office before. It seems like maybe they might be just a little bit more open and
Hmm.
comfortable in talking about certain things, which I think is really good. Just because the more you talk about it, the less awkward it's going to be,
Hmm.
and the more comfortable people will be actually like bringing these topics up, and it's just a good like learning experience, so that way once they start having sex, they feel comfortable talking to their partner
Hmm.
too, because I think like if neither partner has had that experience where they feel comfortable talking about it, it's going to be like really hard to just bring it up. So I
Yeah.
think that's really good. And I think that's what's good about like certain shows, even though it's just TV, but when they bring things up that are like really important, like how in Sex Ed they also talked about not just talking about sex between a man and a woman, but
Hmm.
also talking about like if you want to have like same sex partners, how that could work and things like that
Yeah.
too.
I mean,
So
I feel like a lot of people that have gone through those experiences, like it's hard for them even more
yeah,
than heterosexual couples because who can they turn to? Like if they don't learn this stuff on their own, it's basically like, well, experiment by, trial by fire and all that
mm-hmm.
stuff, and that's when things could go bad and like all this junk. And I think the education system has gotten better because people our age are becoming the teachers. And so like
Yeah,
they're like, okay, well, this is what's going on and I need to teach the
it's true.
kids like this. And I feel like when we were younger, since sex and like the conversation about it was such a taboo topic, even though it's everywhere in media, like we are always sexualizing women, especially for commercials. Like even men when like, they show like this guy looking like this and he's driving this car and it's like you don't know what's going on, but like subconsciously you know what's going on because they're trying to sexualize this to sell more product. And I think also,
Just like how they used to sexualize smoking.
oh yeah,
Like, yeah.
and like how
Oh.
manly it was, like Marlboro, like with those
Or
old
how
cowboy oils.
sexy it was, like for women.
Yeah, those guys are they like can't do that anymore. But anyways, like I was trying to get at was that like I feel like when they were teaching this and they talk about it, they don't use um your I guess your genitals the way they're supposed to be called, like the sexual, not the sexual term, the
proper terminology.
yeah, the proper terminology for your genitals. Like they don't call it like a penis or vagina or a pussy or a dick and whatever like that. They just use like words that you don't
that's proper terminology.
Right, like they don't use
textbook terminology.
They don't use textbooks terminology. They like at least for when they talk to kids, they call it your no place or something like that, or your wee wee or something like that. Things like that. And it's like when you say it like this, you're kind of like training the kid, from what I've read,
to be embarrassed about saying the word penis or vagina.
Yeah, and it's just like, so you kind of ingrain in them that this is something that you shouldn't say out in public because it's like private. But like, yes, that's true, but you should still just call it what it is instead of like giving it like a cute name just to make it like kind of like a comfortable conversation between you and your kid. I'm not saying that, this is how you should raise your children. That's kind of entirely up to you. I'm just saying that as a society, I feel like we kind of set the kids off, at least for our generation, up to like a weird path because we never really had this kind of conversation. And so it was always like, whenever those topics are brought up, it's kind of like brought up in like a joking manner. So it feels like it's not a serious conversation and like all this other junk.
Yeah, I think it is really important to use like proper terminology with kids, just because from what I've heard in the past when it comes to like children being molested and things like that, if you use like certain code words, sometimes they can get lost in translation and they could be telling you something important, but because they don't know the proper term for like a vagina or a penis, then it might be hard to get like an adult's attention when it could be something serious. But yeah, and something else I want to talk about from like things I wish we learned in school was and I feel like this is never, or it was never brought up until like people, like kids started watching porn and then they saw this happening, but that's anal.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I feel like that's just like not even like a topic to like talk about, especially like when you're in school. But I think it's really important just because I heard from a doctor once that, if kids don't know like how serious it could be, like if you're doing anal and then you go to the vagina, that there could be like serious infection, serious risks with that too. And I feel like because that's not taught in porn, like it's like, oh, you have to really be careful.
You have to clean it too.
Yeah, you have to clean and things like that. So I think it's really important because that could really like save a lot of visits to the doctor due to like sexual infections, STIs, and things like that. So
that's actually a really good point because I remember that was one of the things that we saw that was in the show Sex Education, was that there was like gay sex happening and they were for the first time trying to figure out how to do it. And like I was saying earlier, like they must have gone through way worse an experience than like heterosexual couples because one, you don't know that you're supposed to clean down there before you do it. And then two, you don't know how you're supposed to do it. It's like the same situation where like, yeah, I'm sure a lot of people went through this. I can't say that, I've experienced it, but using a tampon for the first time. Like there's never like explanation on how you're supposed to do it. They're just like, you just shove it up there and you pull it out. Like to me, that sounds like, okay, that's pretty straightforward. But like if I'm like going through it,
it's like, because like going through that too, learning how to use a tampon, I think we might have talked about it in like health class, but they kind of just like mentioned, oh, you just do this, but it's like it was never really shown, which I understand. Like even like in the tampon box, there's like a little diagram that shows you, but it doesn't. I can't remember if it does say like how like uncomfortable it can be at first and things like that. And like doing it for the first time, I had to YouTube, actually, YouTube. I think her name is Whaley, and I saw her video where she kind of explained it, and that just made me feel a little bit more comfortable because I was actually like, she didn't like show anything, but
Mm.
the way she explained it made me feel like, okay, like, you know, I shouldn't like be afraid to do this and all that. And there was also like this misinformation going on that if you use tampons you would lose your virginity. Like,
What?
yeah,
That was the thing?
that was a thing
Wow.
that I heard, more from like conservative people and things like that
Mm.
too. And so I think it's just like really important to like be able to talk about this and just feel a little bit more comfortable. For me, doing it the first time, it was just really nice to have that like somebody actually like willing to talk about how to insert a tampon and things like that, because I didn't feel comfortable going to anybody else. So I think I know sometimes you have to be careful when you search for things like that too, but it's like, you know, when you don't feel comfortable talking to anybody, where else are you going to look, you
Yeah,
know,
the
besides like
internet.
Google, the internet. Yeah. So I think, yeah, it's just really important to communicate that to
Yeah,
people.
I
Yeah.
think like we were saying earlier when like we were watching all these shows that since we've been out of school for so long, we really don't know what the curriculum is like. And if
Mm-hmm.
it's anything like it was when we were in school, oh my gosh, they are like not changing at all. And I feel like these shows will teach the kids way better than any of the schools curriculum
Mm-hmm.
ever would. And of course, they're gonna always gonna turn to porn and people that are older than them
Mm-hmm.
that will usually give them answers, but not what they're looking for probably because everybody's different, everybody's experience is always
Mm-hmm.
different. So whatever you've been through and whatever you're going through, it's normal to you. Like don't worry about what you see out there, particularly in the media.
Mm-hmm.
I had to learn that the hard way, just because I experience things differently than these people, and so I always felt like, oh, there's something wrong with me because it's not the same compared to everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, everybody's different, and like what you're experiencing is normal to you. So don't try to compare yourself to
Yeah.
others because your circumstances might be different. So yeah.
Yeah. And especially like when you're young and like if you like friends are having sex and things like that and they come like tell you and bring things up like, oh yeah, it was like so good and we did this and that, but you never really know if they are telling the truth, you
Hmm.
know? Because that did happen a lot when I was in high school where they would just like exaggerate things like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, it was great, when really like for I would say like a larger amount of people that the first time might not be as pleasant as you had it like pictured in your head, you
Hmm.
know. So I think that's really important to keep in mind that what you hear from friends, everybody else, you don't really know if that's true or not. So everybody's experience is different. So what they were telling you is not going to be the same thing that you experience with
Hmm.
your partner because it is going to be a different person as well.
I feel like that's such guy talk because I remember hearing that a lot from the dudes I
Yeah.
was in high school with, and it was just like I remember feeling that back then very envious of them because I was still a virgin, and I was just like, damn, these guys are like pulling girls and doing all this stuff. But then, like realistically, if you really think about when you hear the way they talk, it's just like that doesn't sound fun at all.
Yeah.
It's like, did the girl actually
Right.
enjoy this, or do you
Yeah.
just like, do you think that she enjoyed it because
Yeah.
she's just trying to put on a show for you? And I'm just like, this is high school, man. A lot of times I don't think they really know what they're doing,
Hmm.
but maybe some of them do. Who knows? But it was just kind of funny just having that kind of conversation.
Yeah. It is. And I think something else that I almost forgot was just I feel like in when we were talking about in sex ed class, they always talked about condoms, but I don't remember them talking about birth control.
Mm.
Which, you know, I don't understand why, but I know that like it actually just happened recently at a when I was working in a previous office, you know, we would go around in schools and there were certain school districts that wanted to offer birth control to their students because there was like such a high rate of pregnancy or
Damn.
pregnant teens um that, you know, they wanted to kind of help out with like the sex education and preventing pregnancies. But some school districts were so against it. And to me, that was just like, mind blowing. Like, why would you be against preventing pregnancies, helping like these teens out that they might not be able to afford it, or that they might not have ever learned about like birth control, and telling them like no, and like preventing them from these resources is kind of just like, why, like you're complaining about how these teenagers are, like so many teenagers in your school are getting pregnant, but that you refuse
But you're not doing
to
anything
talk
about
about and like offer, like birth control. um I feel like the misconception is that like the more you talk about it and educate them, that they're gonna want to go out and have sex.
it. Yeah.
It's like, at least for me, like a lot of people that I know, that wasn't the case. Not like, oh, I know, like I'm taking birth control, I'm gonna go ahead and, or like I have access to birth control, I'm gonna go ahead and have like sex right away. I feel like that's why education is like really important. That it's just like, just because you're taking birth control, that's not going to protect you from any STDs and things like that too.
Yeah, you can still get all that stuff.
Yeah, so I think that education is like really important, and educating students that there are like all these options for like not getting pregnant, just to practice like safe sex. Or just being like, oh, use either abstinence or like a condom. Like that's not.
Yeah, I remember that was like the only two options you had, was like the best way to not get pregnant. I think like they said even like a condom is not like 100% foolproof. Like you can still fuck it up by putting it on wrong, which has happened before. And then they said like the 100% foolproof plan to not get pregnant is abstinence. And I'm just like, well, yeah, duh. I mean, that's obvious.
Yeah.
But like that's not gonna be fun for anybody. And so I think like a better communication between like the school and the curriculum and like how these kids are, of course, is like best practice. And I think that will allow a lot more people to be more comfortable to bringing up like their personal problems. And like backpacking on what you were saying, like when the school has these resources but they don't use it. And I remember when I was in college, like the health center, like they were able to just give out free condoms, and I was like, oh wow, cool, you can just go grab some condoms. And I remember like the only time you could actually do that was going to Planned Parenthood, and I had to do that when I was in high school, and I was just thinking, man, it would have been nice if they had this on the school campus. But like it felt kind of like weird, or not weird, but like kind of like you shouldn't be going asking for this, even though it's like you're supposed to.
Yeah.
So it was just like you're not like an open. It's not like welcome.
Yeah.
Essentially, is what I'm trying to
say. I
say.
feel like there's just like a lot of shame that goes into like people telling you, because like you shouldn't do this, and then you go out and do it. It's like, oh, like they just make you feel guilty for trying to be safe. Like, which I know like shouldn't happen. And I think it's crazy. I think in my high school, now that I remember, there might have been like an STD that was going around, and instead of, I feel like they just try to keep it quiet instead of really just like talking about it, because there was just like rumors going on, and then it was just like they never, like that I remember at least, they never like really openly like talked about it. Like, oh, like maybe bringing it up, like more being careful, this is what's going around, things like that, instead of just like all these like misinformation and gossip, instead of like the school actually addressing it. Which I think is also really important to do. And I think that happened in sex ed too. There's something like that too. But I think it's really important because there's so misinformation that can go around, that I think schools, teachers need to take like responsibility to like really act on it and tell students that like it's okay, you don't have to be like, there shouldn't be any shame in this. Like, well, with proper education, communication, we can prevent this from happening.
Yeah, totally. That sounded like an episode from sex education. But anyway, so that was the timer. We've been talking for like 30 some minutes now. We can definitely go into links about this, but I think from what we've experienced so far, and what we've talked about so far, I think that should be good enough.
I think one more thing, I think for schools, something that I would personally have liked is to have, besides the teacher, having actual like people coming in to talk about their experience. Like maybe someone who's in a same-sex relationship coming in and talking about their experience. You know, things like that, and just to kind of get an outside perspective on, you know, things that can happen and what to look out for too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely important. For sure, you know, everybody's sexuality is like their own individual identity. So like it's not gonna be the same for everyone.
Yeah.
I know that for a fact. Like, you know, just go out there and be safe and just, you know,
and communicate.
communicate.
I know it can be like hard to talk about, especially if you have that fear of like that person like leaving you because you want to try something different or because you don't like what they're doing and things like that. But I think in the long run, that's just going to be really important to help strengthen a relationship as well. And you know, if things don't work out, you know, you just kind of have to communicate and kind of come to maybe like a compromise on like how you want your sexual life to be and things like that. I think that's overall what's really important. What's really going to help, I guess, enhance that sexual experience overall is just communicating. And I guess if that person makes you feel uncomfortable or shameful for
you shouldn't be with them in the first place.
I think, you know, that's why it's like important to let the other person know.
Yeah. So yeah, don't feel ashamed for bringing things that you want to talk about, especially when like it's so important, you know, it's like a huge part of like our society, I guess.
Yeah, then just also like you don't have to try things like if you don't want to.
Yeah.
I think that's also like really important. And to just be aware that if somebody is really like pushing it and you don't want to, then to also have a conversation of how that's making you feel.
Yeah. So. Maybe talk to somebody else too, besides just that person. You don't know how if they can react positively or not. But yeah, I think everybody just needs to be able to feel safe to talk to other people. And I think, you know, if you have friends out there, of course, talk to your friends. That's what I used to do. But, you know, now I don't really anymore because they're all so far away. But yeah, all right. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Sitting and Talking.
Yeah, sitting and talking. And yeah, overall, just go out and have these conversations, bring it up to your friends too, because you never know what you might learn. And I feel like, again, the more you try and talk about it, the less uncomfortable and awkward it can be.
For sure.
Like they say, it's only awkward if you make it awkward, right?
That.
Yeah. Well, yep, like and subscribe. Let us know if there's any topics that you guys would like us to talk about or where you thought about, I guess, our conversation today. I know we kind of seemed like we were just a little bit all over the place, but I think
so. Maybe, I mean, I feel like that's just kind of what happens when you get into like a sitting and talking mood.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, check out our other videos up in the corner, and then like and subscribe, like she said. Subscribe to my channel, and I will catch you guys over there sometime.
We'll see you. Yep.
Bye.
Bye.